Hi everyone, it's LadyJenevia. Today's video is going to be a spoiler review of episode 4. I posted a spoiler-free review of episode 4 last week, but now that episode 4 has premiered, we can talk more about what was in it in depth because it was requested that I should in fact do spoiler reviews where I actually talk about what has aired instead of just posting videos in advance that are cryptically tiptoeing around everything. If you are wanting a spoiler-free review of episode 5, which is the episode that will be airing next week, then I would strongly suggest that you subscribe to my channel so then you will know when that video goes up. There are some aspects of the episode that I already discussed in my spoiler-free review of episode 4, so if you have not already watched that, I will put a link to my playlist of all my Defending Jacob videos in the pinned comment section of this video, and you can go and have a look-see and listen to me go on a really long-winded tangent about impressionism and emotions as it relates to Laurie as a character. I'm just assuming that nobody wants me to explain all of that again, if I even explained it well the first time, so I'm not going to be addressing that in this video simply because I already talked about it in my other video. Episode 4 is one that I love for the way that it paints the parallels and diverging paths of Andy and Laurie as parents. The episode opens with Laurie alone in the supermarket parking lot and Andy at what I presume is some sort of community rec center so he can get a swim in that definitely was not put in there just to quench the thirst of fans. Nope. Slow lingering shot on him half out of the water? Completely necessary to the story. All jokes aside, there is a deeper purpose for this opening. The Barber family is in crisis mode. They are being ostracized by their community, though the show hasn't given any concrete answers about whether or not Jacob is guilty. The court of public opinion is strong enough that the Barbers are not interested in subjecting themselves to the scrutiny and judgment of their community. So the episode is thrusting the audience into their emotional turmoil right from the jump. We transition to another meeting with Joanna, Jacob's lawyer, and this is the scene where we see that truly excellent scoring that I kept mentioning in some of the past reviews I've posted. Joanna asks Jacob to go through exactly what happened on the day of Ben's death to ascertain how it was that his fingerprint ended up on him. Tensions run high, and it's further amplified by Atle Örvarsson's scoring, and ultimately it's Laurie that manages to calm the mood, and as soon as she speaks, the tense scoring backs off. I love this whole scene because it reveals a lot about the characters and the overall quality of the writing. The language and information regarding the way criminal court cases work is really meticulous in the show. It goes to show just how much the material benefits from having been originally written by an author who worked in law. Joanna points out how Jacob doesn't need a defense, which seems like a strange thing to say considering she's a defense lawyer. Laurie is confused, just like the audience probably would be, since most of us probably don't have an in-depth knowledge about matters related to a criminal court case. This makes her more relatable to the viewers, which works well when you consider that this episode is largely focused on exploring Laurie's deeper emotions for the first time in the series. Before we talk more about Laurie and Andy, we should probably talk a bit about Jacob. I got a comment from a viewer that wanted to know who I think did it, which seems a lot like them asking me if I think Jacob is guilty or not. I responded to this comment by saying that I cannot answer that question because my opinion is formed off of what happens across the entire season and not just the episodes that have aired to the masses. However, I am willing to discuss the material of Jacob as a character in the context of what has aired thus far. This conversation with Joanna, where she questions him about what happened on the day Ben died, offers a lot of food for thought. Joanna says the following lines: "Your story has holes in it. I don't know why, and maybe you don't either. Our memories are often less reliable than we think, particularly in moments of stress." I talked about that last line in my spoiler-free review of this episode, and it is a scientifically accurate one. There is plenty of research out there that supports this if you want to go on Google Scholar to read more about it. But as for how this fits into the story, it's a really important line to serving the drama and the mystery surrounding Jacob as a character. The audience is left to wonder whether he is knowingly lying or passively lying simply because of stress that is impeding his memory. Also, did everyone pay attention to the fact that he made a new Instagram account? Do we all remember when Andy specifically told him not to get online like that? I'm not saying anything, but I'm just saying. Moving on to the last point of discussion regarding Jacob as a character, when I rewatched him tell Andy about the latest gossip regarding Sarah saying that Derek was questioned at school about Ben's death, I could see right away that Andy's gears started turning and that he wants to jump into action. Andy is a man of action. When Jacob said during the questioning session with Joanna that he didn't say anything about what had really happened because he was worried about getting in trouble, Andy's response was, "Get in trouble?" in an incredulous tone, and the implication is pretty clear there. What he means is that if Jacob had come to him with a problem, Andy would have leapt into action to try to help him. I was trying to figure out if I was meant to read this conversation as Jacob trying to strategically plant the seeds to get Andy to go after Derek, but to be quite honest, I just don't think Jacob is clever or dubious enough to be doing that. Even if we remove the fact that the show hasn't given an explicit answer as to whether or not Jacob did it, they haven't given any sufficient evidence or even hints that he's some sort of manipulative mastermind that will trick or strong-arm people into doing what he wants, even if it's against their will. When Andy found the knife and Jacob asked to get it back, when Andy said no, Jacob didn't really put up a fight. If you are analyzing the story and all its moving parts, you can see that this conversation between Jacob and Andy will undoubtedly send Andy into action because that's who Andy has been shown to be as a person, a man of action. But I will talk more about Andy's episode 4 material later in this review, but first, let's get back to the real star of this episode, which is Laurie. Michelle Dockery deserves the most praise in this episode by far. The speech she gives over dinner where she asks Jacob what he wants them to do, and you can see that the desperation is clawing at her from the inside out. 10 out of 10. The sadness and longing she has while sitting on the outside of her work gala that she cannot attend because she has been informally dismissed until the outcome of the trial will determine whether or not she's accepted back. 11 out of 10. The grimace on her face when she's approached by a stranger, only for that expression to melt into polite relief when she thinks she is finally going to catch a break from her tragic circumstances. 20 out of 10. Waxing poetic about French Impressionism and her one moment of finally expressing her honest pain only for it to blow up spectacularly. 100 out of 10. This episode's greatest strength, if we are forced to pick just one, is how it climbs deep into Laurie's grief. She's mourning the life that she has lost. Unlike Andy or even Jacob, we can see just how much she struggles with being isolated from the connection she had in the various areas of her life. She is no longer able to do the job that she loved, and the people she had once considered her friends are not supporting her in this dire hour. One more detail that I really appreciated upon rewatching this episode, since I did not notice it when I first binged the series, is that when Laurie is first shown in the diner and her food is brought to her, you have to presume that she hasn't been in there very long, and the writer, Janine, is coming in around that time. The focus is such that your eyes are drawn to Laurie, which makes sense because she is the star of the scene, and you don't think anything of this movement in the background, but upon rewatching it, it seems very likely that Laurie was being followed by this writer. It's super creepy and unsettling, but on a technical level, it's very well executed filmmaking. Although I cannot share spoilers, I can advise all of you to pay close attention to the rifts forming in Andy and Laurie's relationship. There's the way she speaks about noticing how he didn't have close relationships outside of their family before all of this started, and the rapidly escalating lying and secrecy between both of them. She lied about going out to dinner with a friend. He didn't tell her he's investigating Leonard Patz. She didn't tell him about the encounter with the writer in the diner. I don't know about the rest of you, but even if I had not seen the rest of the episodes already, I would be very wary of all these lies and secrets. Now, on to everyone's favorite bearded Bostonian, Andy Barber. How you doing, sweetie? As far as plot goes, the main development in his story is that he decides to start tracking Leonard Patz. With his knowledge and expertise of the way criminal court cases work, boosting the essence of who he already is, a man of action, it should surprise absolutely no one that he's off running around playing investigator. But first, Let's have an obligatory color shout out to Matthew's house because this lighting design is A1. Blue lighting in the room where Andy is grilling Matthew about whether he lied about being assaulted by a predator. Very ethically dubious, even if it is just because he's trying to save his son. And yellow lighting in the room where Matthew's mother is sitting and watching, only wanting the best for her son. This is also the same scene where the Bostonian accent jumped out, so if you missed it the first time, go watch it again. If it's something that you really want to notice anyway. It's when he says the line, "Do you hear me?" But I'm not going to attempt to do it the way he did it because I've never really practiced that accent, and I'm not about to have a bunch of Chris Evans stans yelling at me claiming that I made fun of his accent. No, no, no. I did no such thing. There's not a whole lot to dig into yet about Andy following Leonard Patz around. Perhaps we'll discuss more of this plot in the future. I wrote and deleted several different passive-aggressive lines about how it's nice to finally get to see Chris Evans playing some decent espionage material, but I just really don't want to get into discourse about material from other projects in his career. These are Defending Jacob reviews, so I will stick to this material only. My favorite character moments related to Andy in this episode are all ones that directly involve him interacting with Jacob. So let's just go through those and then I will be finished with this video. The first one is when Andy and Jacob are watching a film together. I think it might have been Airplane, but I don't know for certain since I've never watched that. I recognize Julie Haggerty because she was the mum from She's the Man. He's so handsome and rugged and chiseled and great.
He's so handsome and rugged and chiseled and great.
Anyway, we go from the lighthearted laughter to this intensely emotional stare, and what I love about this is that it's really heavy with implication. The right combination of quality writing, acting, directing, and editing, and this lingering shot on Andy puts a spotlight on his longing. They are making plans for movie nights, and it's reminding Andy that his son's future is in jeopardy. It's not that easy to gather around the sofa for movie night when your son is behind bars. Really, all of the soft dad content in this episode is top tier. I fully expect to see the Defending Jacob tag spammed with this scene. You can see how hard he's trying to contain his excitement over his son, still managing to experience the normalcy of having a friend over, or perhaps she's even a potential love interest if he can dare to dream that far. Look at this silly little grin. Sir, stop. We cannot cope when you're out here doing all of that. That's right, I've seen your tweets, stan Twitter, and you know what? You keep up the good work. The world is ending, and if this show is where you are finding your joy, have at it. Another Andy scene I want to highlight is this other one with Jacob. More specifically, let's talk about this shot that's a partial profile of the two sitting on the sofa. Listen, I'm going to put my little tinfoil hat on here and speculate that at some point when they realized there was a coincidental similarity of their facial structures, if you look at them from the right angle, they must have gone, well, obviously we need to show this off. Of course, I'm assuming that this casting was largely based on Chris and Jaeden's acting abilities, and the status that their respective names carry certainly doesn't hurt. But if you end up with a physical resemblance like this for actors that are meant to play related characters, you might as well flex it. Anyway, getting back on track here, this scene was the one that I was talking about in my spoiler-free review, where they have really good shots of Chris emoting as Jacob shares really important information about how Derek got questioned about Ben's death. You can see how laser focused Andy is when he's listening to Jacob, processing this information, and figuring out what exactly he's going to do with this revelation. The last thing that probably warrants discussion is Andy's emotions about Jacob's possible guilt. There's a lot of moving pieces to this, but I will try to keep this part from being too long-winded. Lori asks Andy if he has ever had any doubt that Jacob is innocent. Andy says no. In the flash forward sequence, he remains steadfast while being questioned by Neil and says that he knows that Jacob isn't a murderer the same way he knows that he himself isn't one. My speculation is that there is a lot more to this issue than he will let on, not just to others, but to himself. Maybe on the surface level of his consciousness, he has convinced himself that this is true, but the episode also shows you that for all the strength and resolve he shows about protecting his wife and son, he has an Achilles heel, which is his own father. He still has nightmares about his father after all these years. He lied to Laurie for years about his family origins. Everything about this screams unresolved trauma that would probably benefit greatly from therapy. And I'm not shaming people for going to therapy. In fact, I think more people should go, and society would probably be much better off if more people did go. In summary, my personal analysis of this part of the material is that it's a very multi-layered part of the story and Andy as a character. I think if he wasn't so stubbornly determined to move past his own trauma without having properly worked through it himself, that he might be able to have the rationality to consider that maybe Jacob could have done it. It doesn't mean he wouldn't still try to protect Jacob. Protecting Laurie and Jacob is clearly a massive facet of his identity. However, I'm still very inclined to say that as a character, he is in denial. So those are more of my in-depth thoughts and points of analysis of episode 4 of Defending Jacob. Let me know what you thought of the episode or of my analysis of it in the comment section of this video. If you enjoyed my video, make sure that you leave it a like before you click off, because that really helps out my channel. Follow me on my social medias, which include Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Vero, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!